Welcome to your Howard Stern recap for September 5th, 2023. He's back from summer vacation, and so am I. Just a reminder, it's your YouTube friend Brad here, and I have shirts available in the description. Had some folks buy those. Howard-related. Hopefully you enjoy that. Take a look at the description. And I will be doing these every day that the show is on, so go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Like, comment. Let's get me in the algorithm, but I will give you a wrap-up of the day. Audio only, but you can watch it on YouTube. So Howard starts off right away with a Ronnie update. He says, quote, "I've been on for 45 seconds and I'm already exhausted. I need to go to bed," unquote. But he says Ronnie is still alive. It is way too hot in Las Vegas. He plays a news clip talking about how hot it is. Howard says he has a lot to get to, but they have to get to Ronnie first. They talked about the wedding. Quote, "I heard that Ralph has not RSVP'd for your wedding yet, and I got really upset about that. Are there people not RSVPing for your wedding?" unquote, he said. They talked about that for a while and then moved on to this. Howard says, quote, "Ronnie is so great, and I'm going to tell you why he's great. He's the reason why. Here's the reason why. I have been waiting to get back to the show so I could play this phony phone call as we talk about Ronnie getting old. It's his least favorite thing, and the guys got him really good. As they did a phony phone call on him. It was about dealing with the heat and checking on the elderly, and Ronnie hates being called elderly," unquote. They play the call where they do a health check on him, and Ronnie, of course, goes berserk. This goes on, of course, for a long time. Mildly funny, but more Ronnie. They checked in on his wedding plans. He is still deciding on which Elvis impersonator he will use to marry him. Howard asked if it's going to be the young Elvis or the old fat Elvis, and that went on for a while. And this led to JD joining. They discussed who is Ronnie's best friend. JD mentioned he had COVID over the break as well. Howard said Gary called JD to have a heart-to-heart with him and then wanted to tell him that he loved him, and then JD thought it got weird. Howard said, quote, "I barely left my house. I went out a couple of times to prove to my wife that I'll go out. I went to Sirius XM concert near my house. It was Ed Sheeran," unquote. He said, "I've never seen Ed Sheeran in concert, and he was a very good." And he said, "I turned, and there's Paul McCartney and Billy Joel and John Bon Jovi." And he said to those guys, "Hey, you can learn from this maniac. He's just up there with a guitar," unquote. Howard talked about talking with Paul McCartney and Billy Joel, basically running through all of his famous friends that he got a chance to talk to at this concert. Then Howard mentioned how he got out a couple times, no masked. He mentioned how COVID is coming back, and then he said he's coming back into the city next week to do the shows. So it sounds like he's been forced into coming back in to do the shows. He talked about some dinner parties he had over the break. He had people over. He said he had a bunch of people on the show that he got over in the summer, and JD and others talked about their symptoms about COVID. Then they moved on to talking about Steve Nowicki and his wedding and his friendship, or no longer friendship, with Ralph, and JD being antisocial at the wedding. This led to a lot of Nowicki wedding talk. Jason came in and said the wedding was kind of a flop. The food was bad. Ronnie complained how hot it was. Howard said people were told to be there at 5:30, but they had to wait outside until 6. Jason talked about the food not looking great, and there was not a lot of it during cocktail hour. Then on the invite, it said, "Come hungry." So there was a Shake Shack truck outside a couple hours later, and it didn't get there till around 8. And they talked about how the wedding went for about, half hour. And then how Ronnie was hot and bothered the whole time. Then Sam came in and gave her take. So there's a bunch more on the wedding. He went on to talk about his surprise shows over the summer. He likes the idea of when people begin to broadcast live on Instagram, but since he's on Sirius, he wanted to do it there. Howard said, quote, "And I now have the ability to broadcast like a dinner party, and my wife announces to the table, 'Hey guys, Howard has this ability, so we're going to go live.'" And that was talked about a bit. He talked about how they had a karaoke party with John Bon Jovi and his wife, Jimmy Fallon and his wife, Drew Barrymore and his wife, so everybody went down to the basement and did a song. Talked about that for a little bit, and they talked about the movie Barbie coming out. Robin hated it. Howard talked about the Flash movie. He hated that. Howard is pissed that Ryan Gosling has a hit song from the Barbie movie. He played the top 10 songs, and he had no idea what they were. Moved on to Britney Spears and how she has clearly lost her mind. All she really wanted to do after getting out of the conservatorship was to dance on a pole on Instagram. Gary and John Hine went to a Taylor Swift concert in Los Angeles, and they talked about that a little bit. Before that, then Jimmy Buffett's death was discussed. Howard said he really wasn't that talented, but created a bunch of merch, and that made him successful. Howard's manager told him don't do that, but now Howard's wondering if that's a good idea, if he should be selling cups and merch. Then they went back to John Hine at the Taylor Swift concert. He talks about all the merch he had to buy, all the exclusive merchandise that they have there. And John mentions that it's like a Springsteen community. Gary didn't like that. He said everyone dresses in different Taylor Swift eras, and Howard continues to run through all the merch that he should have created himself. Howard moved on to talk about Demi Lovato coming on the show next week, and then the week after, Paul Simon will be on, and that was exciting to him and Robin. Then they went to break. When they came back from break, they talked about the people who died over the summer. They started with Pee Wee Herman. They talked about how he had cancer for years and didn't tell anybody, and Howard wonders if he would do the same. He talked about how innovative he was, his Letterman appearances and other stuff, and he also talked about the time he was in the adult movie theater. They moved on to Bob Barker and talked about how great of a game show host he was. He talked about how he dated supermodels and other creepiness, and then his dad talked about how he hated when he had contestants dig into his pants for money. It is kind of creepy, actually, think about it. Next dead person that he talked about was Tony Bennett dying over the summer. He talked about how he got into being hip again in the 90s thanks to his son managing his career. He played a little bit of I Left My Heart in San Francisco. Howard said he hates standards and hates that music. He goofed on that a little bit, but he played a little clip of some of the interviews he did with him back in the day. The next person he talked about was Robbie Robertson. Howard didn't think he liked him so much. He saw him at a party, and they never got to talk to each other. But Gary said he thinks he did like Howard. He talked about how he direct messaged him on Twitter about a tweet after Gary talked about enjoying his music. Moved on to Sinead O'Connor dying. They played a little bit about Nothing Compares to You, and then more talk about Jimmy Buffett. They wrapped up with a Dead Comics Summer Roundtable with a bunch of impressionists. Of course, never real funny to me, but Joan Rivers, Gilbert Gottfried, just the normal, not funny stuff in my opinion. By the way, Gary did tweet out a box of Cheerios today, and I guess he's now an influencer. So that's Techno Beaver now an influencer, but I'll show you that picture that he did tweet out. They wrapped up by saying there's a lot of stuff he hasn't gotten to, but there's so much more stuff to get to. So they will have a lot more of stuff to discuss in the next week or next few weeks, but I think the big news is that he's going back to the studio. Sounds like he's being forced in there. That'll be interesting. And the other news is that the wrap-up show now will follow right after the show concludes. So that's a new piece of news as well. So that was the show. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing what happened, what you didn't hear, what you didn't get to hear today. You didn't miss much, I don't think. Again, just a bunch of his unfunny staff members coming in talking about the wedding basically was the main point of the show. Kind of a morning zoo type show, but that's what you got. I thank you for watching and listening here. Again, subscribe, comment, and go ahead and like this one, and we'll be doing this daily until I get tired of hearing the show. Again, not a huge fan of the show, but I'm trying to do this as a service to you, you the fan of Howard Stern. Thanks. Talk to you soon.